Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to today's live stream. We're doing something new. You might be watching us on yet another social network. So big thanks to our producers and welcome to the new audience. I'm Rick Vanover and I'm joined by Karinne. How you doing today, Karinne?
I'm doing all right. It's Friday.
It is Friday, but you have the dubious distinction, Rin, of actually being on the streams twice this week. And, the industry insights, you rocked it up with Jason. So that's, I don't think I've ever done it twice in 1 week. So I think you might take the cake on the team for that one.
Yeah, it was actually a really interesting session that we had Monday. It was all about the different licensing and some of the complications that can come with understanding what you need and all the nuances.
Yeah, and so the topic today and the topic then is around Microsoft 365, and it really applies to everyone. And thank you all for joining. One of the things let's go ahead and do is on the stream chat that you have, go ahead and let us know where you're from with a country or a U.S. state. And we're going to light up the map application. So we got a few of them already pinned up. We got our producers in the house in Georgia. We've got some of our marketing team in Romania already helping us out for the EMEA push. But let us know where you're from. Drop a chat, city, state, that type of thing, and we will make the world green. I've been doing my best to watch the map and watch the chat at the same time. It's kind of hard to do both. But anyways, let's see what we can get. So what's the topic today, Karinne? We're continuing on our demo series. Is that right?
So if you were with us 2 weeks ago, we talked about a lot of the different types of components that you're going to find within the Veeam backup for Microsoft Office 365 software, and we got it initially configured. So now we're going to go into actually configuring some jobs, adding additional components, and expand beyond that simple deployment into what would be considered an advanced deployment in this series.
Indeed. So we're going to have some demos. Karinne's going to do the demos. I did the demos last week on immutability, but this one will be well suited for her. But this is a big view of the Office 365, Microsoft Office 365 deployment for a lot of types of organizations, Karinne. But walk us through some of these components here, not just from the M365 side, but what that Veeam backup for Microsoft Office 365 infrastructure looks like. So this is a good starting point.
So to start off, we have in the center, of course, our Office 365 server, our Veeam backup for Microsoft Office 365 server, which can be deployed on just about any platform out there that supports a Windows machine, including Azure, AWS. If you spin up a Windows machine on Google, you could install this software on it. And of course, also on-prem. Now, this one server aggregates all of the processing and backup for Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and Microsoft Teams, both on-prem and in the cloud, as well as hybrid types of infrastructure deployments. Within the same console, this is where you also add in your proxies and additional repositories, which we'll demo today, and some of those restore explorers.
Yeah, and so one of the things I want to highlight, you ended on it very nicely, those restore explorers. That's an area that I like to say has what I call shared technology with the other Veeam products, so the Veeam agents and Veeam backup and replication. So when we get to that element or that part of the series, when we talk about restores, some of those technologies, if you've used it on premises, might look the same. And I know, Karinne, you know the explorers in and out. Do you like that phrase, shared technology, or is it more complicated than that?
I mean, they did start off in Veeam backup and replication, and I want to say that's why they are so great within this product is because we've been doing this Explorer and application backup and restore technology longer than anyone on the market has even been thinking about doing Office 365 backups.
Got it. Indeed, indeed. All right. So that's the big picture. It's an M365 deployment, the Veeam infrastructure, some of the different on-premises environments that may exist. But we're going to talk about scalability today. And so I love to bring up my definitions. And actually, this is straight out of the dictionary. And it actually aligns pretty well when we talk about IT scalability. And I want to share with you an anecdote. Karinne, you and I were talking to a client a couple weeks ago, and they had a phenomena where they were trying to scale their environment, but they kept adding RAM and processors, and that wasn't what they needed to do. So tell me how scalability applies in general, the whole scale up versus scale out discussion with the Office 365 backup product?
So we work by adding additional work processing units, which are called backup proxies. These backup proxies allow you to handle additional objects. Like we talked about last week, these objects could just be individual components as each of the users that you're backing up. They also create a separation of privilege and domain because these do not have to be all domain proxies. You could have workgroup proxies with separate permissions, separate usernames, separate passwords, creating your layers of protection within your scalability.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that there's a lot of flexibility in that scalability and how you would deploy the environment, and especially for organizations that might be geo-distributed, those types of things, you have some really good flexibility there. So what are those components? Those are critical to how Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365 will scale in backing up an M365 environment. But walk us through these components, at least from a definition standpoint.
So the backup server is what we configured last week, which is initially what you do for a simple deployment. It includes all of these components all in one machine, but it also gives you the ability to coordinate tasks to other machines, like adding additional backup proxies, which again are your workloads, your movers, your restore even aggregation points. The repositories are your data entities where you store anything either on-prem, object storage, or if you have a shared type of storage, we're able to tap into that as well.
Yeah, and I think, those of you familiar with backup infrastructures in general, actually all of these components are not foreign, but they're slightly different in what they connect to and how they write to the different targets for M365 data. So it actually is a really good way to start as a fundamental base. All right, so we've just got word from the producers that the application is ready. So let's see if we can transition over there. We've got Brazil and Mexico from the Americas. We've also got Indiana, Los Angeles, Chicago. Got a couple Midwest represent. I like that, right straight through. Louisiana. Got an additional person from Atlanta. So thank you all for joining from this hemisphere. And then as we roll through the world, we also have, let's go over to Europe. We've got the UK, we've got France, Germany, Belgium, Romania. We've got Dubai way over on the other side, North Africa, Morocco. Thank you for joining. And my map skills failing me here. South Africa, we got Kenya, just some really good India, good representation here across the different regions around the world, especially those of you late at night. I mean, really appreciate it. Spending the evening with us. Good stuff. Thank you all. All right. So as we continue this journey here, Karinne, creating the backup job is kind of that next logical step for, taking a backup of your M365 environment. So, you have your 6 steps to success here, but kind of, tell us a little bit more about the thought process that goes into making a backup job.
So you have to think of a backup job as a policy. And we hear a lot of like scheduling and all these other things, but you're actually creating policies around what type of SLA you need for each user account, how often you need to back up each user account, and the scope of those users. When you first create a job, of course, you got to name it, but then you get into all of the extra configurations, which can be very dynamic. We work with a scope of anything from users, adding individual teams, sites, or entire organizations, and excluding just the applications that you want to back up. Office 365 groups that you may have set up for, say, HR and help desk and finance that are already separate domains, you could create different jobs with each of those departments and then segment off what repository that they're going to and be able to accurately aggregate charges if you're sending them to object storage. It has a lot of dynamic flow to this configuration, but it's very simple to get started.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And when you say applications, are you referring to the different services like email, SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive? Is that what you're referring to when you say apps?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure, All right, well, cool. Now, one thing I got to say is really interesting. I love how when we build these presentations, we've embedded some demos. And the real question is this playing at 3 or 4x? Because there's no way somebody could click that fast. So I don't know which one it is, but it's pretty fast. But we have some real demos. 2x?
2.2. Yes.
2.2. That's intense, man. I can barely keep up. Anyways.
Except for the typing. I did kind of speed up my name for the job.
Okay. All right. There we go. All right. So as we look at creating the backup job, kind of the next thing we want to do, we want to just kind of take you into a demo environment and show you that. So what we're going to do is Karinne is going to create a backup proxy, create a place for those backups to go, those object storage repositories, and then create that backup job to put all that together. So let's see if we can transition the feed over to her screen, and let's see if this works. And it is working. Live is live. And so Karinne, walk us through this part of the demo.
All right, so if you were with us 2 weeks ago, this should look really familiar. All we did was install the software and configured the organization and added our backup auxiliary accounts. It's a great base to start from, but you may be wondering, what if I want to offload some of that work or some of the repository space, or not use just the default repository? Well, the first thing you're going to want to do is add an additional proxy if you're not using this machine for your data moving process. And that's what we'll do here is we'll do VBO, and this will be the domain name of that machine. And it's VBO proxy. And see this checkbox right here? If it was a part of the same domain, I could check that box and use the domain credential setup, but if I leave that unchecked, it's going to go through and I'm going to manually add in the local administrator account for that machine. And make sure I spelled administrator right here. And it'll authenticate to that account and automatically start adding those components in and installing the proxy framework. These components allow that secondary machine to do the processing power on behalf of the scheduling options defined on this machine here. I've already installed a Windows machine on the target location, but that's all it needs to be is an additional Windows machine in your environment. As you can see, it's already finished. It doesn't take much time at all. So if we hit finish, you'll notice you automatically get the option, do I want to add a repository to this proxy? Well, of course, let's go ahead and add an additional repository. And I'm going to name this proxy repo because I know it's attached to my proxy. I select that proxy I just added in, and I can browse to a folder location on the C. I can even create a new backup locale and decide if I want to use object storage. Now, this particular proxy, I'm going to go ahead and leave that just as a local storage account, but we will add additional proxy resources. And then you get retention options. You can decide to keep backups for years, days, forever, whatever makes sense to your organization. And you also have the ability to apply retention when it makes sense. So if you do maybe use an object storage that's a low-cost storage that you get charged based on the access for deleting stuff or reactivating that data continuously, you could change this over to maybe a monthly delete cycle if you're using that low-cost storage and save yourself some money. Now we'll go ahead and hit finish here, and we'll go over and take a look at the repositories. Now, in order to add in an object storage, we initially have to add in that AWS blob or AWS bucket, or excuse me, Azure blob or AWS bucket. Now we're going to do an Amazon S3 compatible right here, but anything S3 compatible, IBM Cloud Storage, are directly integrated into this console. So if you have a cloud service provider, say like Wasabi would allow you to have an additional repository location that's managed by an additional entity. If you do need to add credentials in, you can do that from the drop-down menu here if you already have them added into your console, or you can hit add and manage that cloud account. Now we'll go ahead and remove the Azure blob here and re-add that in so we can see what that looks like from start to finish. So we'll add in Azure and we'll add in Microsoft blob account. And it automatically has my credentials here, but if you need to add new ones, it's as simple as adding in your account and secret key and which region that you reside. Now here it's going to ask you to pick a container. These containers are something that you configure in the cloud environment and then making a folder. So we're going to do this LinkedIn and hit OK and finish. Now this does add in the object storage, but it doesn't make it so it's a repository yet, because the repository actually needs a local cache. This local cache is to help know what's already on the repository or already on the target repository and speed up processes for like restore. You don't have to wait for the entire metadata to load back down from object storage in order to start your restore process. So we're going to do Azure Repo and select which proxy we're going to use. In this case, we're going to use a local server. This local server, we're going to select where that cache is going to live. So we'll go ahead and add a new folder, Azure, and hit OK. And next, now we'll offload to object storage. If I select Azure right here, it's automatically going to add that in. I'll hit encrypt, and I recommend adding in a password just so that data is encrypted on the target site. I happen to have one saved in here that I like using for this type of backup. And you get the exact same retention options as you would if you're doing a regular on-prem type of backup. Now, that's a lot to kind of go through, but you can add in from the same object storage repository multiple folders. That way you can offload data to multiple entities, maybe tracking for size. Again, if you have to build different departments for the amount that they're using. Now, that is everything with adding in the proxy.
Well, one point before we go further on, I had a couple of good questions. One was from William Sellers, my man. How are you? Nice to hear from you. That when I saw Louisiana, that's one of the persons I was thinking of. But your questions, we've fished out some of the good ones here, and those are very valuable for us. So before we go on to the job here, Karinne, I'll start with William's question, and I'll direct this question to you, Karinne. His question is, can you briefly, you don't necessarily have to go back into the demo, cover the snapshot type of backup or the item level backup that is a new kind of retention logic we put in, I think it was in V4. Can you summarize the differences of those two modes real quick?
Yeah, so the major differences between the two different backup modes is whether you're backing up based off of what's in your organization at this time, which is a snapshot of your entire organization, and then you start to offload some of the old versions of files as you've set your retention into history. Now, an item level backup is going to back up all of the current items that you require to have within your retention period and will hold them for the amount of time that your backups have been processing.
And that latter one that you just explained, that was the first mode, is that correct, that we started with?
Yes, by default, that is a snapshot-based retention.
Got it. All right. And then the other question came up from Flavio, said, and I'm changing your question here a little bit. Is this available as a software as a service backup solution? And I really want to point you, Flavio, to all of the different Veeam cloud service providers, or VCSPs. We have a network of service providers across the world, really, that their whole business is to provide flexible modes, to have Veeam powered solutions for backup and others. And the Office 365 backup product that we have has actually been a very successful product in that space. So, I'll put something in the chat for the producers to send out so that you can look some up in your region, but I would really look at those service providers. All right, one more question, then we'll get back to the demo from Miguel. Do you plan to simplify the authentication method to a tenant org? Karinne, I might have a different answer on this one, but I'll let you answer that.
So simplifying the authentication method.
Well, my answer is every new
VCS.
version.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my answer is every new version will have enhancements to the authentication and security, because we're always in this moving target where the platform changes and we have to change. So that's my answer. But when there's a tenant org, I think was his question.
So I don't know if they're referring to the multi-factor authentication, which was already simplified with our more current version. You can actually add in the multi-factor authentication without having to create the application group or manually assign some of the roles to that application for authentication. Now, if they're talking about a VCSP relationship where the credentials may have had a problem whenever updating to a different version, the customer sometimes had to re-enter credentials. That had been corrected in previous versions as well. So maybe a specification, we would be able to give you a better answer.
Fair shout. And then also looking to something that we have announced with the next version, there will be a self-service restore portal. So that might also be another vehicle to help address all of this. All right, let's go back to the demo. Let's create that backup job.
Okay, so coming into here, you'll just select your organization and you can hit backup at the top, or you can right click on this white space and create a new backup job. We'll create a new backup job with a name. So let's call this backup to Azure, because we're going to send this one up to Azure. And you can either select your entire organization, but most of the time, even if you are thinking you're going to back up your entire organization, you want to select it through different options so you have control over your backups and the size of those backups. Namely, if you're trying to back up your entire organization, that includes SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, and some of that data type is very volatile in the sense that if you decide you're going to open up Teams or OneDrive to someone, you may have an explosion you didn't expect in the amount of data that you have on that repository. So we'll go ahead and select, in this case, the organization, and we'll go ahead and edit that organization, and we'll get all of the teams back up here. And then I'm going to add in maybe a group for HR. Let's see if HR is in here. Yep, we got HR. And one of my favorite things to do is also create a dynamic exclude group. So if I have an exclude from backup Office 365 group, I could select my entire organization and groups and then manually put into an Office 365 group, not this one, not this one, not this one, not this one, and those will never be backed up inside of this backup. Now we'll select the proxy. Now here's something to note. Proxy and repositories are linked together. So if you look at the proxy and I select the repository, we don't see that Azure repository I created. But if I come back up here and go to the VPO server itself, I see the proxies that I've added through that proxy. Now, we have a lot of options when it comes to doing backups, whether you're running them daily, certain days of the week, or if you want to run it periodically during certain times, and then schedule. If you don't want it to happen once in a while, you can actually define when that schedule is going to terminate the job and making termination windows. I don't want this job to run maybe between 6 and 2 because I know those are the busiest times during my network. I can start this job immediately as I finish here, and it'll go ahead and start processing that backup. And I can create additional jobs directly from here. You have no limitation on the number of jobs you can create, but you can only back up one user's object per job. So you could have one user's email backed up in one job, one user's SharePoint backed up in one job, but you could not have an additional job that has someone's email backed up in it.
Hmm. Well, that's really interesting. So it's pretty flexible. And I think one takeaway here is that that can give you some flexibility into what different applications have for their different requirements, right? Different apps may have different requirements. One question came in from Dean, and Dean, we're working on this. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. I'll leave it there. And I got a word from the producers that the map is ready. So let's go ahead and take a look at the map real quick while the job starts. And we got a new country, Kyrgyzstan, first time ever on our live stream. So welcome, new country. We've had a couple new places. North Carolina is in the house. We've got Sweden. We've got a couple more people in the U.S. We've got, again, more in EMEA. It's great. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining and letting us know where you're from. And somewhere in Oceania, oh, that's Malaysia. So Malaysia can trick you because it has the island and the peninsular Malaysia. So I know that much. So anyways, thank you all so much for letting us know. Anything else we want to show on the job running, Karinne, or is it underway?
It's underway, and I think it'd be beneficial if we go forward and schedule another session so we can cover all of those Restore Explorers. There's just so much to go through on those and different features. I think it'd be a great next session to the series.
Yeah, I'm thinking the Explorers, recovery, those are really good topics that we can add. And we want to keep these kind of high demo sessions up in the mix. And so as we wrap up here, we're showing you that the ability to back up Microsoft 365 is relatively easy. So as we switch over to the slides here, and if you like what you have seen and you're not yet backing up Office 365, we've made it easier than ever. So if you go to that QR code or just the link down below or just anywhere at the Veeam website, chances are you'll be right there ready to download a trial or the community edition. Now, the community edition of Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365, that's a great way to prove the value. Can you tell us a little bit about the community edition, Karinne?
Yeah, so the community edition is actually the exact same installed piece of software. So you get the same feature set. The only limitation is having 10 users. So if you have under 10 users, like at home, you could use the software completely for free, unhindered, including all the Restore Explorers.
And it applies to the OneDrive data, the Teams data, the SharePoint, and the email. Is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome. Love it. All right. Well, hey, and again, that link here can take you to the download. So thank you all for joining on the live stream across the different social networks here. And on Monday, Jeff Reichert and Dave Russell are going to start a two-part series in the Industry Insights theme around ransomware prevention, and remediation. That'll be Monday at noon, New York time, same place, right here on the live streams. And then Friday, a week from today, two British guys who live in the US. It's almost like two guys walk into a bar type of a joke. But anyways, Sam Nichols and David Hill are going to actually show you how Veeam can save you money in Veeam Backup for AWS, for the AWS backup product. I tell you, there's so much what I call cloud economic intelligence built into the Veeam products, friends. This is going to be a great topic. So on behalf of the entire production team, the marketing team, in EMEA and the Americas who have brought you this and produced this content, thank you so much for attending and producing that. Karinne, thank you so much for driving those awesome demos today. It
was a pleasure.
Oh, and we got a late arrival from Oman. Welcome. That was the other country I couldn't spot, so thank you for that. All right, everyone, thanks for watching and have a great weekend.